Marcus Chen knew he was in trouble when the red warning light started flashing across his cargo ship's control panel. The engine made a sound like an angry cat, then went completely silent. In the black void of space, silence was never good. "Come on, baby, don't do this to me," Marcus said to his ship, tapping the controls like they might magically start working again. The ship had been making strange noises for weeks, but Marcus kept putting off repairs. Money was tight, and spare parts were expensive. Now he was drifting near the border of Valtharian space, and that was very bad news. Everyone in the galaxy knew the Valtharians didn't like visitors. They especially didn't like humans, who they thought were loud, messy, and stupid. Marcus tried sending a distress signal. But before he could finish typing the message, 3 sleek silver ships appeared around him. They moved like deadly fish through the darkness. The Valtharian ships were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. A voice came through his radio. It sounded cold and formal. "Human vessel, you have entered forbidden space. Prepare to be boarded." Marcus sighed. Well, this day just keeps getting better. The Valtharians came aboard wearing armor that looked like it was made from liquid metal. Their faces were long and narrow, with pale blue skin and eyes like winter ice. They moved with perfect coordination, like dancers who had practiced the same routine 1,000 times. They put golden chains around Marcus's wrists and ankles. The chains looked fancy, but they were stronger than steel. Marcus tried to make a joke about the situation, but the aliens didn't react. They probably didn't understand human humor anyway. The Valtharian ship was nothing like Marcus's messy cargo hauler. Everything was clean and organized. The walls were white and smooth, without a single scratch or stain. It made Marcus feel like a dirty barbarian in comparison. They flew for what felt like hours before reaching a massive space station. It was shaped like a crystal flower, with thousands of lights twinkling along its surface. Marcus had to admit it was impressive, even if he was probably going to die there. Inside the station, they walked through corridors filled with more Valtharians. All of them stopped to stare at Marcus. Some looked curious, others looked disgusted. A few young ones pointed at him and whispered to each other. The throne room was the biggest space Marcus had ever seen. The ceiling was so high he couldn't see the top of it. Thousands of Valtharian nobles stood in perfect rows, all wearing fancy robes covered in jewels. They looked like a forest of elegant trees. At the far end of the room sat Queen Lysara on a throne made from some kind of black stone. She was tall and graceful, with silver hair piled high on her head in an elaborate style. Her dress was deep purple, and it seemed to glow with its own light. The guards pushed Marcus forward until he stood in front of the throne. The golden chains clinked with each step. Everyone in the room watched him like he was some kind of dangerous animal. "Kneel before Her Majesty," one of the guards commanded. Marcus looked up at the queen. She was studying him with those cold blue eyes, probably deciding how to execute him. But something caught his attention. Her fancy headdress, which was covered in precious stones and delicate metalwork, was sitting slightly crooked on her head. It made her look a bit like his grandmother, after she'd been gardening all day. Instead of kneeling, Marcus tilted his head to one side and said, "Your Majesty, I don't mean to be rude, but your crown is a little crooked. Did you have a rough morning? Because I totally understand. My hair never cooperates either, especially after space travel." Quote, the entire throne room went dead silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Several nobles made choking sounds, like they'd swallowed something wrong. The guards next to him looked like they wanted to disappear. Queen Lysara blinked slowly. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she was going to say something, then closed again. For a moment, she just stared at Marcus like he was a puzzle she couldn't solve. Then, something unexpected happened. The corner of her mouth twitched. It was so small, Marcus almost missed it. But then, it happened again. And this time, it was bigger. Queen Lysara started to laugh. It wasn't a polite royal chuckle. It was a real laugh. The kind that bubbles up from deep inside and can't be stopped. Her shoulders shook, and her hand went to her mouth. But the laughter kept coming. The sound echoed through the massive throne room like music. Every noble in the place looked shocked. Some of them had their mouths hanging open. Others looked around nervously, like they weren't sure what they were supposed to do. Marcus grinned. He'd always been good at making people laugh, even when he probably shouldn't. His mother used to say he could find humor in a funeral, which wasn't always a good thing. When the queen finally stopped laughing, she wiped her eyes and straightened her crown. The throne room was still completely silent. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. Queen Lysara looked down at Marcus with something that might have been curiosity. "What is your name, human?" "Marcus Chen, Your Majesty." "Sorry about the whole trespassing thing. My ship decided to die at a really inconvenient time. And you thought this was an appropriate moment for jokes about my appearance?" Marcus shrugged. "Well, I figured I was probably going to die anyway, so why not go out making someone smile?" The queen studied him for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised everyone, including Marcus. She smiled back. Queen Lysara couldn't remember the last time she had laughed like that. It felt strange, like using muscles she had forgotten she owned. The sound of her own laughter echoed in her mind long after it had stopped. She looked down at the human standing before her throne. Marcus Chen didn't look like much. His clothes were wrinkled and stained with engine oil. His hair stuck up in odd directions. He was smaller than most Valtharians, with brown skin and dark eyes that seemed to hold some kind of permanent amusement. Most prisoners who came before her spent their time begging for mercy or trying to prove their worth. This human had made a joke about her hair, in front of the entire court, and somehow it had been exactly what she needed to hear. "Lord Kethrin," the queen said to her chief advisor, a tall Valtharian with stern features and silver robes, "what is the usual punishment for trespassing in our space?" Lord Kethrin stepped forward and bowed deeply. "Death, Your Majesty. Swift and clean, as befits our merciful nature." Marcus raised his hand like a student in school. Excuse me, but can I vote on this? Because I'm really against the whole death thing. I've got places to be, people to annoy, that sort of thing." Several nobles gasped at his casual tone. Speaking to the queen without permission was forbidden. Making jokes during a death sentence was unthinkable. But Queen Lysara found herself fighting back another smile. "You seem remarkably calm for someone facing execution." "Well," Marcus said, looking around the magnificent throne room, "if I'm going to die, at least it's happening somewhere fancy. Back home, I would have probably died in a ditch somewhere, covered in space, grease, and regret." "Tell me about your home," the queen said suddenly. The words surprised even her. She never asked prisoners about their personal lives. Marcus brightened. "Earth. Oh, it's a mess. Beautiful mess, though. We've got these things called oceans that are basically giant puddles of salty water, and weather that changes its mind every 5 minutes. The whole planet is like a teenager going through mood swings. Arender. The RN. Lord Kethrin stepped forward again. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should proceed with the sentencing. The prisoner's babbling serves no purpose." But Queen Lysara held up her hand. She was curious now. And curiosity was not an emotion she felt very often. "Continue, Marcus Chen. Tell me more about these mood swings." Marcus grinned, clearly happy to have an audience. "Oh, you want to hear about weather? Yesterday might be sunny and perfect for a picnic. Today might be a hurricane that tries to blow your house into the next county. Humans just shrug and carry umbrellas. We're used to everything being unpredictable." "How do you function in such chaos?" asked the queen. "We adapt," Marcus said simply. "It's what humans do. When life gets weird, we get weirder." When things go wrong, we make jokes about it. When the world tries to kill us, we figure out how to kill it back, or at least annoy it enough that it leaves us alone. Queen Lysara found this fascinating. Valtharian society was built on order and predictability. Every ceremony had been the same for thousands of years. Every conversation followed proper forms. Every day was carefully planned and controlled. Do you not find such uncertainty disturbing? She asked. Marcus laughed. Are you kidding? Uncertainty keeps life interesting. Sure. Sometimes your spaceship dies in alien territory, and you end up in chains in front of a beautiful queen who might have you executed. But sometimes, uncertainty means you find the best pizza place in the galaxy by taking a wrong turn. Pizza? Asked the queen. Food, Marcus explained. Flatbread with cheese, and whatever else you want on top. Humans put everything on pizza. I once saw someone put ice cream on pizza. It was terrible, but they seemed happy about it. Queen Lysara tried to imagine her formal court dinners with ice cream pizza. The image was so ridiculous that she almost laughed again. Almost. Your species sounds chaotic, observed Lord Kethrin disapprovingly. Oh, we totally are, Marcus agreed cheerfully. But that's our secret weapon. When everything is chaotic, chaos doesn't scare you anymore. When nothing goes according to plan, you get really good at making new plans. Fast. Give me an example, the queen commanded. Marcus thought for a moment. Okay. So there was this human general named Napoleon. Tiny guy, massive ego. He was fighting this huge battle, and everything was going wrong. His original plan was falling apart completely. So what did he do? He threw away the plan and came up with 6 new ones in about 10 minutes. Drove his enemies crazy because they couldn't predict what he would do next. Did he win that particular battle? Yeah. Eventually, he lost the war because he got too confident. But that's humans for you. We're really good at solving problems and really bad at knowing when to quit. Queen Lysara realized she had been leaning forward, hanging on every word. When was the last time someone had told her a story that wasn't about trade agreements or military reports? Lord Kethrin cleared his throat. Your Majesty, the prisoner has been entertaining, but we really should proceed with the execution. The court has other business to attend to. The queen looked at Marcus, who was still smiling despite facing death. There was something about his attitude that she found refreshing. In a court full of people who were afraid to speak honestly, here was someone who couldn't seem to stop speaking honestly. Lord Kethrin, she said slowly, what if we delayed the execution? Temporarily. The throne room erupted in whispers. Delaying an execution was almost unheard of. Your Majesty, Lord Kethrin said carefully. May I ask why? Queen Lysara studied Marcus for a long moment. I find myself curious about human society. Perhaps this prisoner could be useful as a cultural advisor. For a limited time. Marcus's eyes widened. Really? You're not going to kill me? I did not say that, the queen replied. I said we would delay your execution while you tell me more about your chaotic species. Consider it a stay of execution in exchange for education. Marcus grinned so widely it looked like it might hurt. Your Majesty. You just made my whole year, which I wasn't sure I was going to have, so thank you for that. For the first time in decades, Queen Lysara looked forward to tomorrow's conversation. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus became the strangest prisoner in Valtharian history. Instead of a cell, he had been given a small but comfortable room near the Queen's quarters. Instead of bread and water, he ate meals that were better than anything he'd ever tasted. And instead of counting down to his execution, he spent hours each day talking with Queen Lysara about the differences between their peoples. The arrangement scandalized the court. Lord Kethrin made his disapproval clear at every opportunity, and the other nobles whispered behind their hands whenever Marcus walked by. But Queen Lysara found these conversations more interesting than anything that had happened in her reign. Today, they sat in the Queen's private garden, a beautiful space filled with crystalline plants that chimed softly in the artificial breeze. Marcus was trying to explain the concept of human humor to someone who had lived her entire life in formal ceremonies. "So you're telling me," Queen Lasara said, "that humans deliberately say things that are not true in order to make others laugh?" "Not exactly," Marcus said, munching on a fruit that tasted like strawberries mixed with starlight. "It's more about unexpected connections. Like, if someone slips on a banana peel, it's funny because bananas aren't supposed to be dangerous weapons. But someone falling could be seriously injured. Well, yeah, that's where context matters. If they're really hurt, it's not funny anymore. But if they just look surprised and embarrassed, and the banana peel was completely random, then the absurdity of the situation makes people laugh." Queen Lasara tried to process this. "So humor is about randomness? Sometimes. Other times it's about timing, or pointing out things that everyone thinks but nobody says out loud. Or taking something serious and looking at it from a completely different angle." Marcus stood up and did an exaggerated impression of Lord Kethren's formal bow, complete with his stern expression and stiff posture. "Your most gracious and magnificent Majesty, I humbly request permission to breathe in your august presence." Despite herself, Queen Lasara laughed. It was getting easier each day. "That's terrible. He would be mortified if he heard you." "Probably," Marcus agreed, sitting back down. "But that's the point. Sometimes important people take themselves so seriously that they forget they're just people. Humor reminds everyone that we all put our pants on, one leg at a time." Pants? Clothing that covers your legs. The point is, everyone has the same basic human experiences, even kings and queens. Everyone has bad hair days. Everyone has embarrassing moments. Everyone makes mistakes. Queen Lasara considered this. In Valtharian society, leaders were expected to be perfect at all times. Showing weakness or making mistakes was seen as failure. But if a ruler appears fallible, does that not undermine their authority? "Maybe," Marcus said. "But humans have found that leaders who can laugh at themselves are often more trusted than ones who pretend to be perfect. People relate to someone who admits they're not always right. And that seems dangerous." "Everything worthwhile is dangerous," Marcus replied. "Flying spaceships is dangerous. But we do it anyway. Falling in love is dangerous. But people do that too. Even making friends is dangerous because you might lose them someday." Queen Lasara had never thought about friendship as dangerous before. But Marcus was right. Caring about someone made you vulnerable. Is that why humans seem so fearless? Because you accept danger as natural? "We're not fearless," Marcus said with a laugh. "We're terrified most of the time. But we've learned that being scared doesn't mean you can't do something. It just means you have to be smart about how you do it." "Explain," Marcus thought for a moment. "Okay. Imagine you're walking through a dark forest at night. You know there might be dangerous animals out there. A smart person doesn't pretend the danger doesn't exist. They bring a flashlight. Make noise so they don't surprise anything. Maybe travel in groups. They're scared, but they do what they need to do anyway. And if you encounter a predator, then you adapt. Maybe you climb a tree. Maybe you back away slowly. Maybe you make yourself look bigger and scarier. Humans are really good at coming up with solutions under pressure because we've had to do it for thousands of years." Queen Lasara found this perspective fascinating. Valtharian strategy focused on careful planning and avoiding unexpected situations. The idea of deliberately accepting uncertainty seemed reckless, but Marcus made it sound like a strength. "Tell me about your wars," she said suddenly. Marcus's expression grew more serious. "That's a heavy topic. You sure you want to hear about human violence? I want to understand how your species thinks about conflict." Marcus was quiet for a long time. "Humans are really good at war. he said finally. Too good. Maybe. We've spent most of our history fighting each other over land, resources, ideas, sometimes just because we didn't like the way other people looked. That sounds primitive. It was. But here's the thing about human wars. They taught us some important lessons. We learned that the side that adapts fastest usually wins. We learned that morale matters more than superior weapons. We learned that sometimes the craziest plan works because nobody expects it. Marcus paused, looking up at the artificial sky above the garden. But most importantly, we learned that war is expensive and stupid and should be avoided if possible. Some of our greatest leaders were the ones who found ways to make peace instead of war. How do you make peace with enemies? You find common ground. Everyone needs food, shelter, safety for their children. Everyone wants to be respected and treated fairly. If you can give people those things, they usually don't want to fight anymore. Queen Lysara thought about the rebellions that had plagued Valtharian space over the past century. Her military always responded with overwhelming force, crushing uprisings before they could spread. But the rebellions kept happening. What if common ground doesn't exist? Marcus shrugged. Then, you get creative. Humans once had two groups that hated each other so much, they built a wall to keep them apart. After 50 years, people started talking through the wall, then trading through small holes. Then eventually they tore the whole thing down because they realized they had more in common than they thought. And if that doesn't work, then sometimes you have to fight, Marcus admitted. But even then, humans try to remember that today's enemy might be tomorrow's ally. We've had wars with people who are now our closest friends. Queen Lysara stood and walked to the edge of the garden, where she could see ships coming and going from the station's docking bays. Many of those ships belonged to species that had once been enemies of the Valtharian Empire. But they had been conquered and absorbed, not befriended. You make it sound simple, she said. It's not simple at all, Marcus replied. It's probably the hardest thing humans do. But we keep trying because the alternative is living in fear forever. And humans really hate being afraid all the time. Queen Lysara turned back to him. Is that what you think we are? Afraid? Marcus met her eyes steadily. I think you're the most beautiful, advanced, powerful civilization I've ever seen. And I think you're scared to death of change. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. The attack came at dawn, station time. Marcus woke to the sound of energy weapons, firing somewhere in the distance, and emergency lights flashing red across his room's ceiling. He jumped out of bed and pressed his ear to the door, trying to hear what was happening in the corridors outside. Heavy footsteps ran past his room, followed by shouting in the formal Valtharian language. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. Panic. His door burst open without warning. Two guards in the Queen's colors rushed in, their weapons drawn but pointed at the floor. Human, you must come with us now, one of them said urgently. What's happening? Marcus asked, pulling on his clothes as quickly as possible. Rebellion, the second guard replied. Lord Kethrin has taken control of the military command center. He claims the Queen has been corrupted by alien influence and is unfit to rule. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He had known his presence at court was causing problems, but he hadn't realized how serious the situation had become. The guards led him through corridors filled with smoke and the smell of burned metal. Emergency barriers had dropped in several places, forcing them to take long detours through maintenance passages. Other guards and nobles ran past them, some heading toward the fighting, others running away from it. They reached the Queen's private chambers to find them barricaded and defended by a small group of loyal guards. Queen Lysara stood in the center of the room, still wearing her sleeping robes but with a military communicator in her hand. Her usual perfect composure was strained, but holding. Marcus, she said when she saw him, I'm glad you're safe, though I fear your safety may be temporary. What's Lord Kethrin's plan? Marcus asked. To execute me for treason and install a more traditional ruler, the Queen replied calmly. Then to purge the court of anyone he considers corrupted by foreign influence, starting with you. One of the guards monitoring the communications equipment looked up. Your Majesty, Lord Kethrin is broadcasting to the fleet. He's claiming you've been enchanted by human magic and are no longer capable of rational thought. Marcus snorted. Human magic? I wish I had magic. I'd have fixed my spaceship weeks ago. Despite the serious situation, Queen Lysara almost smiled. Your species' humor is poorly timed, Marcus Chen. Actually, Marcus said, this might be exactly the right time for humor. What do you mean? Marcus looked around the room at the scared faces of the Queen's supporters. Lord Kethrin is counting on fear and tradition to win this rebellion. He expects you to respond like previous Valtharian rulers have responded, with formal military tactics and careful political maneuvering. And you suggest something different? I suggest we do something completely unexpected, something so crazy that it throws off his entire plan. Queen Lysara studied Marcus for a moment. Over the past few weeks, she had learned to trust his strange human perspective on problems. What did you have in mind? 1. Marcus grinned. We surrender. The room went completely silent. Even the sound of distant weapons fire seemed to fade. Surrender? The Queen asked. Not really surrender, Marcus clarified quickly. But we make Lord Kethrin think we're surrendering. Then we turn the whole situation around on him. Explain. Marcus began pacing around the room, his mind working quickly. He's got troops positioned to attack this chamber, propaganda ready to explain why he had to kill you in battle, and supporters lined up to take control after you're dead. Yes, the Queen said slowly. But what if you don't fight? What if you walk out there, announce that you're stepping down, and hand power over to him peacefully? Several guards made sounds of protest, but Marcus held up his hand. Here's the thing about rebellion, he continued. It works best when the rebels look like heroes fighting against oppression. But if the Queen voluntarily steps down and asks Lord Kethrin to explain to everyone why he felt the need to threaten violence, suddenly, he looks like a bully, attacking someone who wasn't even fighting back. Queen Lysara began to understand. You want to make him look unreasonable. Exactly. And then, when he's standing there trying to justify why he needed an army to remove a queen who was willing to leave peacefully, you ask him to explain his plan for improving the empire. He has no plan, the Queen realized. He only wants to return to the old ways. Oh, right. And when people ask him specific questions about how the old ways will solve current problems, he won't have good answers. Especially if you ask the questions in front of representatives from all the different species in your empire. One of the guards looked confused. How does this help us retain power? Marcus smiled. Because humans have learned that the best way to defeat someone who's all emotion and no logic is to give them exactly what they think they want, then let them prove they can't handle it. Queen Lysara walked to the window and looked out at the space station's central plaza, where crowds were gathering. She could see both supporters and opponents mixed together, all trying to understand what was happening. It's incredibly risky, she said. Everything worthwhile is risky, Marcus reminded her, using her own words from their earlier conversations. And if Lord Kethrin simply has us executed immediately, then we make sure the execution happens in front of as many people as possible. And we make sure our last words are something that will haunt his conscience forever. The Queen turned back to Marcus. What would you say if these were your last words? Marcus thought for a moment. I'd probably make a joke about how Kethrin's planning skills are worse than his fashion sense. Then I'd thank you for showing me that laughter really can change the galaxy. For the first time since the rebellion started, Queen Lysara laughed. It was a small laugh, but it seemed to restore some of her confidence. Very well, she said. We will try your mad human plan. But I want you to know that if this fails spectacularly, I'm blaming you in my final speech. Fair enough, Marcus agreed. But if it works, I want you to consider making humans official allies instead of just tolerated guests. Queen Lasara looked at him with something that might have been affection. Marcus Chen, if this works, I will give humanity whatever they want. All we want is respect, Marcus said simply. And maybe some decent pizza in the cafeteria. Despite everything. The Queen smiled. Then, she straightened her shoulders, walked to the door, and prepared to either save her empire or die trying. Queen Lasara walked into the central plaza with Marcus at her side and her remaining loyal guards behind her. The space was packed with thousands of Valtharians and representatives from other species throughout the empire. Word of the rebellion had spread quickly, and everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Lord Kethrin stood at the opposite end of the plaza, surrounded by soldiers and backed by a group of conservative nobles. He had expected to fight his way to the Queen's chambers, not to have her simply appear in public, where everyone could see them. Lord Kethrin, Queen Lasara called out, her voice carrying clearly across the plaza. I understand you wish to speak with me about the future of our empire. Trast. The crowd murmured in confusion. This wasn't how rebellions were supposed to work. Lord Kethrin stepped forward, clearly thrown off by the Queen's calm demeanor. Your Majesty, you have been corrupted by alien influence. For the good of our people, you must step down. Very well, the Queen replied simply. The plaza erupted in shocked gasps and shouts. Even Lord Kethrin looked surprised. I hereby announce that I am stepping down as Queen of the Valtharian Empire, she continued, her voice carrying over the noise. Lord Kethrin, I assume you have a plan for governing our diverse empire and maintaining peace among our many species. For the first time, Lord Kethrin hesitated. We will return to traditional Valtharian values. Excellent, the Queen said. Could you please explain to our friends from the Zelani worlds how traditional Valtharian values will address their need for new trade routes through the disputed sectors? Lord Kethrin looked confused. That issue will be resolved through proper channels. Marcus stepped forward slightly. What channels would those be exactly? Because the Zelani have been waiting for an answer for 6 months. The human should not be speaking in this forum. Lord Kethrin snapped. Of course, Queen Lasara agreed. As you are now our leader, it is your decision. However, the Zelani representatives are here. Perhaps you could address their concerns directly? A group of tall, blue-skinned aliens near the front of the crowd stepped forward. Their leader, Ambassador Thex, looked expectantly at Lord Kethrin. The trade route issue is complex, Lord Kethrin said uncomfortably. It requires further study. We have been studying it for 2 years, Ambassador Thex replied. Queen Lasara was working with us to find a solution. What is your proposal? Everyone. Lord Kethrin had no answer. He had spent so much time planning the rebellion that he hadn't thought about actually governing afterward. Queen Lasara continued calmly. Lord Kethrin, what about the food shortages on the mining colonies? And the requests from the Corvan Federation for expanded diplomatic relations? And the reports of pirate attacks near the Outer Rim? With each question, Lord Kethrin looked more uncomfortable. The crowd began to realize that he had no solutions, only complaints about the current situation. These matters will be handled according to tradition, he repeated weakly. Which tradition? Marcus asked innocently. The one where you ignore problems until they go away, or the one where you solve everything with military force? Silence, Lord Kethrin shouted. You are a prisoner who should have been executed weeks ago. Actually, Queen Lasara interjected, Marcus has been serving as my cultural advisor. His insights have been quite valuable in understanding how different species approach problems. She turned to address the crowd directly. For example, humans have a saying, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. Perhaps that wisdom applies here. Ambassador Thex nodded thoughtfully. The human suggestions for our trade route problems were creative and practical, more useful than anything we've heard in months of traditional negotiations. Other species representatives began speaking up, sharing examples of how Marcus's unconventional perspective had helped them find solutions to long-standing problems. Lord Kethren's supporters looked increasingly uncomfortable as they realized the rebellion was turning into a public debate about governing philosophy. "This is irrelevant," Lord Kethren declared. "The Empire has always been ruled by Valtharians, according to Valtharian law." "And how is that working out?" Marcus asked. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like your empire is held together by fear and tradition. But it's not actually growing or improving." Queen Lysara stepped forward. "Marcus has helped me see that our strength doesn't come from maintaining unchanging traditions. It comes from our ability to adapt while preserving what truly matters. Further, Marcus has helped me see, with Crossdent, Marcus has helped me see that our ability to adapt while preserving." She looked around the plaza, making eye contact with representatives from dozens of different species. "We rule an empire of incredible diversity. Instead of seeing that diversity as a threat to be controlled, what if we saw it as a resource to be celebrated?" The crowd began to murmur with interest. This was a very different vision from anything they had heard before. "Lord Kethren," the Queen continued, "you have succeeded in removing me from power. Now please explain to everyone here how you plan to make their lives better using only traditional methods." Lord Kethren looked around desperately. His military supporters were beginning to lower their weapons as they realized the crowd was not with them. His noble supporters were whispering among themselves nervously. The old ways kept us strong." "Did they?" Marcus asked. "Because your empire hasn't expanded in centuries. Half your species feel ignored or oppressed, and you're so afraid of change that you tried to overthrow your own queen just for talking to a human." The crowd was now clearly on the Queen's side. Even some of Lord Kethren's supporters were nodding in agreement with Marcus's points. "I propose a new tradition," Queen Lysara announced. "Instead of ruling through fear and rigid control, what if we governed through cooperation and mutual respect?" She turned to Marcus. "The first step would be to establish humanity as our first true ally, rather than a conquered species. What do you think, Ambassador Chen?" Marcus blinked in surprise. "Ambassador? If you'll accept the position," the Queen said with a smile. "Though I should warn you that diplomatic functions are usually quite formal and boring." Marcus grinned back. "Your Majesty, I've spent the last month making formal court life more interesting. I think I can handle boring diplomatic meetings." The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. Even some of Lord Kethren's soldiers were smiling. Lord Kethren looked around at his collapsing support and made one last desperate play. "You would trust the future of our empire to an alien comedian?" Queen Lysara's expression grew serious. "I would trust our future to anyone who can help us find solutions instead of just identifying problems. Marcus has shown me that wisdom can come from the most unexpected places." She addressed the crowd one final time. "I hereby announce the formation of the Valtharian Commonwealth, a new form of government based on cooperation between equals rather than domination by superiors. All species will have a voice in decisions that affect them." The plaza erupted in cheers from every species represented. Lord Kethren's rebellion was over before it had really begun. Later that evening, Marcus stood on a balcony overlooking the station's main thoroughfare, watching ships from dozens of different worlds coming and going. Queen Lysara joined him, no longer wearing her formal crown but looking more relaxed than he had ever seen her. "So," Marcus said, "how does it feel to start a revolution by accident?" "Terrifying and exhilarating," the Queen admitted. "Much like everything else you've taught me about being human." "For the record," Marcus said, "I don't think you need to be human. You just needed to remember that being royal doesn't mean being perfect." Queen Lysara laughed. and the sound carried across the evening air like music. Marcus Chen, you have changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. Same here, Marcus replied. Though next time my spaceship breaks down, I'm definitely going to make sure it happens somewhere with better food. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the galaxy go about its business around them. Neither of them noticed the small crowd that had gathered below, drawn by the sound of their laughter. For the first time in centuries, the Valtharian Empire was a place where joy was allowed to exist alongside power. And it all started with one human who couldn't resist making a joke at exactly the wrong moment. Or maybe, Marcus thought, it had been exactly the right moment after all.